Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I have something very different in mind today. I'm going to discuss some of the costs it takes to heat a house based on my knowledge and experience. And I'm hoping you find this interesting and you'll stick around till the end. The idea for this video came through by a bunch of conversations I've had with people lately. The Commonwealth I live in seems to be trying to get people to heat their houses with electricity, and yeah, that's an okay way to do it. Electricity is very efficient, but I think people conflate efficiency with cost effectiveness or low price, and that's not necessarily the case. So I thought I would just give some numbers. For reference, this is beginning of 2024, the first quarter, and as I said, I live in the United States. Bottom line up front, if you don't want to stick through the whole video, I hope you do. My best guess is heating the house with oil costs about half of what it would if I were trying to heat it with electricity. And it cost me about $30 to deliver 1 million BTU into my house with oil. And to do the same thing with my heat pump, I think it would cost about $72. And I'm going to do a simple analysis, I promise. It's just algebra, nothing too heavy. And I'll show you my methodology and I'll share with you my assumptions. So if my numbers don't jive with what you think, you can go off and do your own analysis. And it's not that hard. So first things first, a BTU, for those of you not familiar with the English units, it's about the amount of heat in one match. It's a pretty small unit of energy. I'm using 1 million because I think that's, when you're talking about heating a house or doing real work in the real world, I think 1 million is something a little bit easier to grasp. I hate to hit you with a big table up front, but this is simply me going out and getting the heat content of various fuels. So you just do a web search, something like how many BTU are in a gallon of gasoline, how many BTU are in a quart of wood. You get the idea. You can see on the left hand side we have heating oil, kerosene, natural gas, gasoline, etc. All kinds of different fuel sources. The next column I have the amount of BTU in a given unit. Most of the units are a gallon. Down here you can see natural gas. We measure it by the therm, and I think a therm is 100 cubic feet. And once again, I think they go with the therm because it's a more convenient unit. And electricity, of course, is kilowatt hour. And then I have two species of wood in case you want to heat your house with a wood stove. They're both hardwoods. One of them is oak and maple. And the table I was reading didn't expound any further than that. But oak, being one of the harder hardwoods, has about 25 million BTU in a cord, where soft maple is about a medium hardwood in terms of how hard and dense it is. And that goes down to 17 million in a cord. In a cord of wood, for those of you not familiar with it, it's a stack of wood 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet, making 256 cubic feet of wood. And when you stack wood, it's thought that about half of it is the air spaces between the logs. So anyway, another thing to take away from this table is you can see that heating oil is the top of the heat in terms of BTU per gallon. Diesel fuel is very similar to home heating oil, and it's almost the same, not quite. Kerosene a little below that, gasoline below that, propane below that, and ethanol is significantly lower than gasoline. So it's important to realize if you're running an automobile that's burning some proportion of ethanol with the gasoline, you're going to be getting poorer fuel economy because the fuel you're burning is diluted with ethanol, and ethanol just doesn't have the same amount of heat as an equivalent amount of gasoline. Anyway, that's a side note. And over here in the final column, I gave you the number of units to get to 1 million BTU. So you can see for home heating oil, it's a teeny bit less than 7.25 gallons. Gets you 1 million BTU. For diesel fuel, it's a teeny bit more than 7.25 gallons. And you can read the rest. I won't read it to you. Gasoline, almost 9, etc. And just to be clear, I live in the United States, and when I'm talking about a gallon, I'm talking about a U.S. gallon, which is 3.79 liters. And finally, to get a better idea of 1 million BTU, if the gallon conversions didn't do it for you, if you were driving a Toyota Corolla, that would get you about 300 miles or 500 kilometers. That's about 1 million BTU, give or take. And an 18-wheeler, a tractor-trailer, they get about 65 miles or 100 kilometers out of 1 million BTU. But in terms of heat, it gets a little trickier because when I say cold, my idea of cold is probably not the same as yours. But in the United States, we break the country into climate zones. And I live in climate zone 5, which kind of cuts through the center of the country here. it's not unusual for us to have several days where the temperature is right around the freezing point. So, days are a little bit warmer, nights are a little bit colder, and that can go on for a week or so. And that's not the coldest we get, but, just to give you an example. And in a situation like that, where the outside temperatures are around there, to heat, a modest house, 1,000,000 BTU might heat a house for 3 days. And of course, that depends on a gazillion things. And finally, to do the analysis, we need to take into account the thermal performance or the efficiency. And that's basically, you have the heat delivered to your appliance, whether it's a furnace or a boiler or other, and how much of that heat is actually available to go into your house, right? There's always some amount of heat that's lost somewhere else. And where I live, how they measure boiler performance or efficiency, the idea is over here on the left, you've got potential heat going in, right? You've got some amount of fuel, whether it's natural gas or kerosene or whatever. Hopefully the lion's share of that goes up into your house, but there's always some amount of heat that's lost, like I said. And most of this lost heat is thought to go up your chimney. Assuming you have an appliance that's venting to a chimney or a flue. And what we do where I live is you measure the temperature of the gases in the chimney or the flue when the boiler is running, and you can back out the amount of heat going up the chimney. And the assumption is whatever's not going in the chimney is staying in the boiler, and that's how much heat's available to your house. So pretty simple stuff. And when talking about electricity, if you're talking about resistance heat, which is what you would see in a toaster element or that glowing red thing in your toaster oven or whatever, that's thought to be about 100%. Pretty much all those kilowatt hours are turned into heat. It's not quite 100%, but it's pretty close. Some of it is lost as light. What you're seeing as red is not heat, right? Heat is actually infrared. You can't see it. And some of it is lost maybe in the switch, if there's a clock on the appliance, etc. But it gets trickier when you're talking about heat pumps, because heat pumps don't actually create heat in the traditional sense of a furnace or a boiler. They actually move heat. And a heat pump can move 2 kilowatt hours of heat while consuming only 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. So it looks as though they have an efficiency that exceeds 100%. But again, they're not creating heat. They're not violating any laws of physics. They're just moving heat from an area where there's more heat to an area where there's less heat. And instead of calling efficiency, they call it a coefficient of performance. And for example, your air conditioners and refrigerators are heat pumps. And the thing to remember about heat pumps, particularly air source heat pumps, and here's a table, it's a little busy, but I want you to look at this line here that goes from the lower left to the upper right, and this is the efficiency, and the x-axis here is the outside temperature, and the freezing point of water is by the red arrow, and you go from hot outside to cold outside, and you can see that the efficiency just gets worse and worse and worse the colder it gets. So air source heat pumps, perform their worst, basically when you need them the most. It's a little differently if you have a ground source heat pump. Assuming your source is infinite, then you won't have this issue. So basically, my formula, to have 1,000,000 BTU delivered to the house, the cost of that, I need the cost of the 1,000,000 BTU, which I showed you on that table earlier, simply divided by the efficiency or the coefficient of performance. Pretty simple stuff. And here's my spreadsheet where I did the simple calculations. Again, over here on the left, you've got an assortment of fuels. The next column, I give you the prices that I believe I'm paying. I pay 49 cents a kilowatt hour, which is, if it's not the highest in the country, it's definitely in the running. For oil, I'm currently paying a little less than $3.50 for a gallon, but I got $3.50 here to be a little conservative. I don't have a good number on natural gas, but my best guess based on my research is around here we pay about $2.20 for a therm. And I don't have propane or pellets, but I got the table for future calculations should I want to do them. And I think where I live you can still get a cord of wood for around $250, but the wood that I burn in my wood stove, and I've done videos on it, I get for much cheaper than that. For my heat pump, I'm giving it an efficiency of 2. It's not a very new unit, and I seem to remember from the information I got when I purchased it, they listed the peak efficiency at 3, and I think I'm considerably off of the peak efficiency. So during the heating season, I'm giving it 2. Might be a little better than that, I don't really know. And my oil boiler, it was measured at a thermal efficiency of 88%, and I'm listing 85, just to be a little bit more conservative. And for natural gas, if you have a furnace, it's not unusual to be up around 90%, even north of 90%. It's a little lower than that if you actually have a boiler. And finally over here, here's the punchline. This is the dollars for a million BTU generated by my heat sources. So my heat pump would cost about $72 to have a million BTU ready to be delivered to the house for heating. And my oil boiler, it's about $30. Okay, I have an update that I'm going to put into this video. I did run across somebody that heats their house in my area using natural gas. And during the high point of the heating season, when you take the dollar amount that they paid and divide it by the number of therms, it came out to $2.42 per therm, which brings it to $26, which is, about 10% cheaper than oil on that calculation. And again, that's assuming 90%, and I don't know how good or bad their particular heating system is, but just to give you an idea, $2.42 is pretty close to $3.50 a gallon for oil. When it's not the heating season, the way we bill gas is there's a monthly fee, and that monthly fee can be significant. So outside of the heating season, if you're not burning a lot of gas, if your therms go down, the calculation came out to $3.10. So let me put that in, and you can see that gas is more expensive than oil, according to my little handy-dandy calculator, outside of the heating season. And of course, wood can come out cheap, but it so much depends on how much you pay for the wood you're burning. So anyway, that's all I have. Again, pretty simple stuff. You know, if I didn't get something right, leave a comment. I'm hardly an expert on all these things, but I'm an engineer. I like doing calculations like this. So thought I'd share. And again, as always, appreciate you coming by. Stay safe, take care, and keep your eyes out for the next one.